I tried to present a little bit in between the other papers, because what we did is actually an annoying, silly exercise. What we did for the Dutch income statistics is trying to repair several breaks we have. So we would like to have a consistency in the time series as long as possible. That's what we invoke to do. So setting the scene, compare also to the other papers. It is related to the DINA papers, but it's more related to the paper Koen was presenting this morning. So we are looking at what is done at market income level, going to disposable income and everything in between. We have something like over 500-600 variables in between, but of course I will only show the elements of the main categories. So we are looking at especially redistribution from income. So in most cases, I will talk about equivalized household income. In most cases. When I look at top incomes, I will switch to individuals. You can do, of course, that both. So we skip all difficulties, like what Antoine was talking about pre-redistribution, or all kind of traditional tax incidence analysis. All economic behavior is excluded. It's just an accounting exercise. That's what we actually did. To compare this with a rather recent Dutch study on DINA, this is just presented a couple of weeks ago. This is a slide of a combination of Dutch Bureau of Economic Organization and also CBS, Statistics Netherlands, to show you that in case you're running over the percentiles, of course you see that higher incomes will have a higher income and lower, but we focus only on parts of this total trajectory. So in our situation, redistribution usually is lower compared to the DINA studies, and income inequality is usually lower. This is the Dutch study from CBS, CPB-CBS, done only for the year 2016. And in the Paris database, there are more data points available, as I understood, but it's not based on this study, so probably will be updated because this was a thorough one. So to give you a glimpse, this is the thing we are not going to do. To give you a perspective before we go into the statistics of the Netherlands, I would like to allocate the Netherlands, Belgium and France to each other based on redistribution. First, the outcome, looking only at equivalent disposable income on two elements. What is the poverty and what is the inequality of income? So, and I have split the axis on the average of what is this over something like 25, mainly European countries. And then you can see, as you expect, France is also in between, but I was not able to dot them because I think they are coincident with Hungary or something like that, that they're all around the mean, both on the subjects of at risk of poverty, the European definition of at risk of poverty, meaning people below the 60% of median income threshold, and on income inequality. That's the first one. So, and of course, across countries, there is, by definition, I would say, a relationship between the two. When I just go to redistribution, how many people, what is the share of people lifted out of poverty, or what is the change in the in income inequality when we compare market income with disposable income, this is plotted on the next axis, then you can immediately see that the Netherlands is different compared to Belgium and France. France and Belgium do have an above average, compared to these European countries, level of people lifting out of poverty or reducing income inequality. While the Netherlands, usually people think that we are doing a good job here, we are below that average. It doesn't say that much yet, I would say. This change, hopefully, when you say, okay, you have a performance as a country in reduction of income inequality or poverty, but what does it cost? What is the social spending? So I was plotting this graph to the net social expenditure. So there's made a correction for the taxes on social benefits. So you can compare those countries. And then you can see how much money is devoted to achieve the level we find for those countries in lifting people out of poverty or redistribution. And then you can immediately see that the Netherlands is below average, and Belgium and France are probably where you would like them to have. They have an above average performance. But still you're not, I would say, in the position to really compare. So I brought the last slide to see what does happen with 1 point of GDP social spending. How many people will be lifted out of poverty or will be a reduction in income inequality? So I would say this is something like an indicator of targeting of social policy or something like that. And then you can see that the Netherlands is, because when you do this over time, then you can see that the Netherlands is coming down across the line. We are now nowadays a universal system, while Belgium and France also are in that part. But you see on the more right above, the more targeted system. So we are 3 countries, I would say, Belgium, France, and were still rather universal, but especially the Netherlands, UK, and Denmark are doing a poor job in case of targeting. So that's where the countries are related. This is not part of our study. Today's topic is about the reparation, the repair of the breaks in the time series. This is co-authored by people from both Leiden University, our team, and Dutch Statistics. And I have to tell something here, because we were having an issue. Statistics Netherlands did not document pretty well their stuff among the tax reforms in 1919 and 2001. And the guy on the right, Wim Bos, he was retiring. And we were thinking, we have to go fast here. In case you would like to repair those breaks, you need that knowledge. So we made a cooperation here, and he was also on the list of Leiden University for a couple of while to repair those systems. So I think that is in most countries the case. When you go back, really back in time, the documentation of all those variables is rather poor. But we were lucky just the last time to get him. So what we delivered, and you can find it via the website, is not only to have a nice time series for academia, for scholars, but we would like to have that also policymakers could have access, journalists could have access. So we made, with Statistics Netherlands, a tool that people can just have all the information behind this. And also, of course, for scholars, you can have the full data sets. So, what is the issue in the Netherlands? We actually have 3 time series. One, the first one from 1970 up to, let's say, 2000 is based on panel. Usually it is all administrative data based on a panel. So there was over 150,000, what we say, current persons in household were were the data collected, fully based on tax administration. And there was the same holds for 2000, 2014 in a little bit different sample setting. And from 2011 onwards, we have not a sample, but we have the full records of all 12 million people paying any tax in the Netherlands. We are talking only about income taxes, social contribution, and all those things. What we did is take the full collection of the 2011 data onwards, and going back in the same definition of all income components, and then going back to 1997. That's what we did. That is essentially what we did. And that was, of course, that was a huge effort. For those who are not familiar with the institutions in the Netherlands, the main issues here were a lack of social premiums variables in the early stage, especially pension scheme contribution. We had a lot of pension schemes in the Netherlands, and a lot of companies doing that. So there was just missing information. And of course, always the issue is imputed rent. There was a change in the system a couple of years, and now we did the 2011 system backwards. Okay. Okay, show this. Of course, this is what I would call a definition of income, which is a tax law-based definition. So what we measure is what is measured and also allocated by the Dutch tax law, what should be income. It's not related to a nice Hague-Simon definition of income or something. And of course, mainly imputed rent, capital gains, and all those things, unobserved income is not included. So we try to use the tax records to repair it as good as we can. Okay, what does it mean? Depending when you look to the left or to the right, left in billion euros, right percentages, what we did correct, and especially in the early years, we had to adjust mainly gross income because of the missing variables of social contributions. And on the right-hand side, also in disposable income adjustment because of the imputed rent definition which changed. We are talking about huge amounts of money and also, of course, adjustments in the income definitions. So when you look over time, and this is just on average, we are going to play around a little bit later, then you can see over time, 1997 up till latest moment 2019, we saw, of course, an increase in both gross and disposable income on average, which is something like, more or less 1 or 2% a year. So we became richer. This is the first thing to show. Okay. Oh, before I'm gonna show you some trends, it's always important to understand that the decomposition of the society changed dramatically over time. Especially the decomposition of households, for example. When you look at a couple of the couples with children, they halved over time, more or less. And of course, more people now in a one-person household. When you look at earning their income, then you can see that the employees were a little bit going down. Self-employment was going up. And of course, those senior citizens living on a pension scheme increased over time. So when we try to understand what is going on in the next graphs, you have to realize that the composition of the society changed dramatically. The same holds, because we are going to talk about poverty as well, about the people not being born in the Netherlands, immigrants. Okay. So when we look over time, we see some convergence, maybe it's rather huge, the convergence, between the income share in gross income brought in by partners. So we only have calculated here those households where there are 2 earners in the household, so we like this. And then we're showing what is the contribution of males and females, and it's a little bit converging over time. Labor participation of female workers in the Netherlands was increasing over time, but we were lagging behind, especially part-time jobs still is the norm in the Netherlands by female women. Yeah, of course. Correlations to what? Okay, we didn't make a correlation. This is administrative data, so you have all the information you need. So you know you can just disentangle those couples from the one person household, and then just because there's an allocation, of course, by the tax administration, tax records, who is bringing in what in the households, and then you have this kind of thing.
The question was rather whether you can tell us something about the side of doctors.
Yeah. So in case you're interested, I don't know the result. Egbert Jonge, who is one of the co-authors, did with Jim Bain paper. It was also published in a Dutch journal, ASB, where we indeed saw that those people having higher education, higher income are correlating over time. Also over time. Correlating in itself and over time, yeah. Which is puzzling because I can give you already the conclusion. Income distribution overall did not change that much. So it's always puzzling, this partial questions.
This is a phenomenon you also observe in the UK. There is less inequality within households over time, but more across households.
Across households, that's what you see. Yeah. I agree. We can do this, of course, for every year. What I did here, just to give you an idea who is where in the income distribution, percentiles of the income. Top income, 100, lowest income, 0. And of course, what you expect is that those people, employees over the percentiles, in case you go to the right, we have a higher share of people earning their own income, while students are on the left-hand side, hardly having any income. And of course, the senior citizens living mainly on the pension scheme are concentrated in the let's say between the 15 and 25 percentile. Self-employment is all over the place, having rather low incomes and also very high incomes. Probably the same here in Belgium. Okay, skip this one. I like the presentation about Lawrence dominance. We did it not from a yearly basis, but of course we did it between the income concepts. So what you see over here is the market income, gross income, and disposable income. And there's Lawrence dominance. And then you can see what is the reduction in income inequality when you just compare those two statistics. And then you can see hardly something like half of the initial income differences are redistributed or are gone after the tax benefit system did their work. And especially large effect, what you expect by the pay-as-you-go system of pensions, that's our way, but also the tax system. And my question about the pension benefit system, it's always a question, should you incorporate this one of them? So we did it also, all these kind of calculations without the pension system, because maybe that's redistribution, but then over your own life cycle or something like that. It's always difficult. And then that's why we initiated the study. We were really puzzling whether income inequality, the same like we see here in Belgium, is it going up, is it going down? We were not sure because all those tax breaks. And when you look at the upper points, that's market income. And when you do a statistical test, then you can see whether you start in 1997 or in something like 1919, there is indeed a small but a statistically significant increase in market income inequality, which is not the case with disposable income. So in the Netherlands we see indeed that, the same as in Belgium, as I heard today, that the tax benefit system had to work harder, had to redistribute a little bit more over time, which makes sense because we have a gradient of the population and only that part of the pay-as-you-go system makes sure that you have to redistribute more over time. These are the statistics. You can, of course, present it by genies. I heard a discussion. I was not aware that it was such a heavy debate, so I was glad to bring just a presentation per decile in this case. And what you can see from this chart, hopefully, whether or not you like this picture in the way inequality analysis is high or low, that's of course a normative subject. You can say probably without any normative judgments, that's rather stable over time, with the exception of the top income, so I will focus on the top incomes a little bit later on, but it's rather stable over time. People ask me, do you have an explanation for that? And of course we have an explanation, because in the Netherlands the Dutch Bureau of Economic Argumentation, CPB, is well known because they always have to calculate all tax laws or other initiatives to see what is going on with the labor market, what is going on with koopkracht and all those things. And in the Netherlands, in case we find in the proposal that some groups will have a higher income or will have lost in income, we repair that immediately. That's really part of the Dutch way of making policy. So when you're looking over 40 years of time, then of course you can expect, because it's part of the way we work in the Netherlands, that there is not a real change in the income distribution. So actually what we did, coming out World War II, is saying, because that's already that we did this kind of policy, we were not debating about what is the income distribution we would like to have. That was never an issue, that was just given at one stage. But from that stage on, we were rather intensive in making policies having this stability in income distribution, as you can see over time. Okay, compare to other countries in the European country, I already state that we are a little bit below the average. Going to the part of financing the welfare state, so I'm now only looking at the tax part of the tax benefit system. What you expect, hopefully, is when you just decompose the several contributions and income taxes we have, looking over the percentile distribution, when you go up, a higher share of your income is taxed away, which is a progressive tax, with the exception of the top 1%, or actually the top 2% when you see, and especially the top 1%, which makes sense because we have all kind of income ceilings for the contribution of pensions and other social insurance. But it is what you're going to see. Over time, I've presented here exactly the same kind of income taxes and social contributions, but now for the population as a whole. And then you can see, especially from 1995, where we have the lowest income inequality and the highest tax burden, they were combined in that year, then you can see that the tax burden is a little bit lower compared to a couple of years ago. And then I was puzzling because we were repairing those breaks and it was going pretty well. And as you can see, when we divide this tax burden, so I go back, I take the whole tax burden, and then I'm going to do this over time, over the percentiles. So this is a combination of those graphs. And then when you look at, for example, all people, there's no percentile, then you can see that there's hardly any effect of the tax breaks. You can see that's a little bit lower, the tax rates here over time. And the same holds for the, I would say, the median, the P50. And maybe even for the P80, but look what's happening at the top of our income this week. We have still dead breaks. And probably it has to do because we had to impute and make some calculation about the contribution for pension schemes. So I'm really digging in that issue. Probably we didn't do that pretty well. So we try to repair the breaks. They are doing it pretty good, with the exception of, I would say, the top 1 or 2%. Then something, I'm not sure how this works in Belgium or in France. What I show here is again the median tax burden over the percentiles, but then I also look at given any income, because it's standardized gross income here, so you can compare over the percentiles gross income, they have the same height. What will be the tax burden? And then you can see there's a lot of variation going on giving any point of gross income. So most people think that in case you have income and your income will increase, you have to pay more taxes. That's progressive taxation, isn't it? But now you can see that when you look at one, let's say the median or whatever, 1 point, that there's also a lot of variation. Partly this makes sense. Elderly people have a lower tax contribution because of their pension scheme. Self-employed have deductions. People having their own house, mortgage, have a deduction for mortgage, and so on and so on. But see what is the difference is rather large. Giving a lot of issues in the Netherlands because people who are living in an ordinary neighborhood having more or less the same income can have huge difference or huge differences over €1,000 a month in difference in taxes. So this is how we manage the Netherlands. We have a lot of tax deductions and a lot of facility tax allowances on the groups, but this is the results. I was expecting when we did this exercise that it has increased over time. So probably 20 years ago we didn't have this kind of pictures, which was not the case, because I think that when you just compare 1990 with 2019, you cannot immediately say we have much more variation at any time in the percentile nowadays than it was 20 years. So this was also in our system for over decades. It was a surprise for us. Looking at the time, skip this. Yeah.
Intuitively, or maybe you'll come to that, but you were assuming that now there are more deductions in the personal income tax, that's creating a larger divergence or larger spread. But is this spread not more driven by the type of income rather than...
Age is important. But we have trade. The housing market is important because these are huge parts, having or having not a mortgage. But I was expecting, because the policy from 1990 onwards with 2 tax reform was the introduction of all kinds of special allowances, and of course they are in there, but other mechanisms seems to be important as well over the decades. I have to dig in that. I don't have the answer yet. Something about purchasing power parity. I skipped this one. Although this one is nice, of course, I would say this is another way of presentation, the income distribution, going now to the lower part of the income distribution, over age. So this is the figure for 2019. And then you can see what is the share of people below a certain amount of money. This is not the European definition, it's the Dutch definition, but there's a threshold. And then you can see, of course, as expected, that young people who are in the labor market have a lower probability at risk of poverty. And then at the end of your career, working career, usually people get into all kind of social benefits. And then it goes down immediately, which is a special case, because when you do this for other countries, it's the other way around. But in the Netherlands, hardly, 3% of the elderly people have an income below the poverty line, because we defined our AOW, which is the public age-as-you-go pension scheme, in a way that it is above this poverty line. Okay, so we don't have that issue. But there is still an issue. It is going, I would say, in the good direction. You can see over time that poverty is going down, also in groups, but still at a rather high level for immigrants, and especially when you look at kids. So today I would say that poverty is mainly an issue among kids. And I go back, it's not an issue, I repeat, for the elderly. We hardly have any poverty among the elderly. We do have among kids, and within the kids, in the group of kids, it's usually kids from immigrants. So we have to do something like that. To give you an idea, this is the relative risk of poverty households, where we normalized the Dutch background as one, and then you can see, depending what is your background, what is the higher probability of being at risk of poverty. And of course it makes sense that within the wars of Syria much higher. But look, when we look at all households compared to the kids, usually it's factor 3 as high being at risk of poverty. Okay, I skip this one. Lower part of the income distribution, finally the upper part of the income distribution, and this was, I would say, we expected something, but not as what I'm going to tell. So you can, of course, divide the top 1%, top 5%, top 10%. This is a presentation by individuals. So I switch here from household income to individual income, okay, because it makes sense, it's earnings of income. And then you can see that the top 10% earn something like 30% of income, and when you go to the top 1%, it is 6 or 7%. Who are those top earners? Usually men, hardly women. By age makes also sense, I would say, and especially self-employed and those people worked in the farm. So this is straightforward. Did it change over time? And we were expecting a little bit of that, given also the other figure. But we didn't find any significant results in the change in income shares over time, independent whether you take the top 1% or the top 10%. And there are some regressions or results showing that. Showing this in an international comparative setting, again the Paris database on top incomes, and they are having something like over 177 countries involved. So we were just ranking them from the highest to the lowest, and it appeared that the Netherlands was the lowest. So we always have this, while the figure of in the database of Paris is more or less the same. Compare what we find. We didn't change that much over time. Other countries did, especially, of course, in the English-speaking countries. I skip this one. This was my presentation, André.
Thank you very much. Are there questions, remarks?
It's not, okay, it is tax administrative data, but it's not solely the tax administrative data. It's compiled with also the organizations of social benefits, but also, for example, the students' loan organization, but it's all administrative data. But this is the way Dutch statistics for decades already organized their data based on tax administrative data. For example, when you see self-employed, it is based on what is the largest income in their case, it's income from profits or something like that. And then they are earmarked as age, we know from the records. And all those things we know from tax records. So all qualifications are based on tax record information. No, that's the information we don't have. In case we are only using tax records, that's not in the tax record basis. So then we have to go to other records, and that is an issue. I would say that from an administrative point of view, this is, I would say, the best information we have, because there's also in the Netherlands an incentive not to underreport your income. Why is that? Because we have a lot of tax allowances related to all kind of things. So this is a very balanced system. But of course, we are missing other information. So a lot of scholars are always trying to combine this data, which is possible, with all kind of educational or other background variables. Yeah. And they are also, for people who are doing research, this is available for everybody. So the full tax records with all the definitions is available. So we are now, of course, in a project with the Luxembourg income study. We are one of those counter experts to impute also this in the Luxembourg income study database. Yeah. And also the detail review. If someone was telling, I think that was you. Yeah, we are also having this imputed in the detail review. Egbert is there. Yeah. It's our culture. It's our culture. So I have to explain what is the role of Dutch Bureau of Economic Accreditation in Dutch policy, which is a very dominant one from World War II. Jan Tinbergen, the Nobel laureate, he started that one, and he was trying to convince all people that you should have scientific-based, academic-based, all kind of thing. But one of the side projects was a model trying to explain what is happening in the arbeidsmarkt when you change policy, what is happening with the income distribution, all those things. And we are sensitive for changes in income, I think, in the Netherlands. So in case there's a proposal showing that the high income groups will profit on it, we are going to change that rule. We are rather sensitive in the Netherlands. And we also accept the outcome of the models of the CPB. So that was another part of our project, because the data lying behind the models of the CPB were also having this issue still. So that was a part of the issue. Yeah. 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 The last one is a difficult one. I think it's a preference, but we are in a difficult situation. We have been trying to incorporate much more information in these kind of models, making it also rather sensitive for policymakers to add a special tool for a special group to have some income compensation. So it is also part of making the tax system rather difficult. So I'm not sure whether this is a pro or a con in the system. For the outcomes, I think it was helpful, but we have some tools in our tax system nobody understands. They're only there for income reparation motivations, and also difficult.
Okay. Thank you very